However, I think that if you pray too early in the morning, anyone who prays before 10 o'clock in the morning, all of your prayers go on God's answering machine. Because if I were God, never mind, go ahead.
But it seems God-centric in the way after it's got a pleasant fragrance, and you can't give a sacrifice that has a moon
Yeah.
to it. But then in all of this, it's very agnostic. Like it's not about God at all. Is that intentional?
That's wonderful. Say that again. In all of this,
It's very agnostic.
it's not about God at all. It's not about God at all. What's it about? It's about you. It's about creating certain states of mind in people. It's about reminding people of certain ways of being. See, I would put it slightly differently. It's what I said earlier in that very long drasha during Shabbat, during the service. If you think of God as the king who lives in heaven, and I'm here and God's there, then it's a question of when I pray, does God hear my prayers? I'm doing this for him. But if you think about God as Chayei Olam, the world, the life of everything, the eternal world, the eternal life, and I am in God and of God, and that part of my prayer is to help me realize that the boundaries of selfhood don't end with me, but are vast, and I am part of this thing. I'm trying to get that frame of mind. Then the change of my mind is in fact an act of worship, because it brings me consciously closer to the source of my being, and to the reality of my being. And it has an ethical answer. I mean, I constantly go to this because that's how I'm trained, but it has an ethic to it. Because when I step out of the service, having felt my connection to the all, I'm going to treat the person who's sitting next to me very different. Because one of the problems with the old other kind of prayer is that if it's me and you and we're both trying to get his attention, right, then we're competing. It's like two kids going to try to get the father's attention. Hey, get out of my way. It's my turn to pray. Right? It's my turn to pray. People pray like that sometimes. I don't know if you're not here, of course, but right? But instead, if I see myself as part of the all, then I realize that we're connected to each other. The change of the human heart becomes itself an act of worship. I think that's the better way to think about it. I realize that I am a cell in the body of God. And when I realize that sense of myself, there's bitterness and sweetness to it. The sweetness to it means I'll never die, because God never died. The bitterness to it is I only have a little time to enjoy this manifestation, right? And that's the consciousness that one enters Kedusha with. That's Mechalkel Hayim. That's what it tries to get to. I want to do one more thing. We have 15 minutes. I got 2 hours more to teach. One more. Look at the last page. They're talking in Mishnah chapter 4 about the Amidah. The Amidah in the daily prayer service is really long. Everybody knows that? It's sometimes called Shmona Esrei, because it's made up of 19 brachot. Shmona Esrei, Rabbi, means 18. Why do they call it 19? Why is it 19 brachot if it's called the 18? Anyone here a basketball fan? What's the name of the basketball team that plays in Salt Lake City, Utah? The Utah Jazz. Have you ever been to Utah? There's no jazz in Utah. It should be the Utah Mormons or something, right? The Tabernacle, right? Right? The ball team, the very famous, expensive, bad one that plays in Los Angeles is called the Los Angeles. How many lakes are in Los Angeles? None. Because it came from Minnesota, and the heat came from New Orleans, right? So it was once called the Shmona Esrei. It got called the Shmona Esrei. They added a 19th blessing, but it was too expensive to change the stationery, so they kept it to Shmona Esrei. In any case, it's a long prayer. Rabban Gamliel said, every day you got to say all of it. All of it. That's the minimum daily adult requirement for a Jew. Rabbi Yeshua said, you don't have to say all of it. You can say the short form. Come on, some days I'm busy. I missed my train. I got to hurry up. He says, if you can do all of it, great. But if you can't, do the short form. Rabbi Akiva said, there is no minimum daily adult requirement. It depends on your ability. Your ability either to read quickly or your ability to gain kavanah. right? But the radical one is the next one, Rabbi Eliezer. And he said, I reject the whole premise. The whole premise is ridiculous. Boys, we're not talking about a formula here. We're talking about pouring out your heart in front of God. We're talking about breaking your heart in front of God. Hosemi tfilato keva. If you make your prayer keva, if it's formulaic, if it's fixed, eino tachnonim, it's not really prayer. It's not really prayer. What has Rabbi Eliezer just done in that statement? He's just blown away the whole conversation. What does he say? If you open the prayer book and say, it is my obligation to pray from page 1 to page 273, right? What was the famous joke? Ladies and gentlemen, please turn and pray on page 40. But if for some reason page 40 is missing from your book, pray page 20 twice. You know? I mean, if it becomes formulaic, if it's about getting through the service, if it's about getting through a body of liturgy, don't do it. It makes no sense. If it can't be done as a deep expression of the heart, it's not anything. Now, it's interesting because it's the only mitzvah that counts that way, by the way. If somebody asks you for tzedakah and says, I'm trying to collect money to feed hungry people, I'm trying to collect money to build Eretz Yisrael, I'm trying to collect money to send kids to school, even if you don't feel like it, it is your obligation to give it. You have to put a mezuzah on your house. What if you don't feel like it? You do it anyway. You have to keep kosher. What if you don't feel like it? You do it anyway. Any mitzvah can be done without kavanah. It's better if you got kavanah, but any mitzvah can be done without kavanah. There's only one mitzvah that can't be done without kavanah, and that's tefillah, because tefillah is kavanah. Because there's nothing there. There's no cow. There's nothing to be accomplished if it doesn't mean anything. You're fooling yourself. And pro forma ritual is a form of idolatry, because now you're worshiping some sense of social obligation instead of really praying. So Rabbi Eliezer, who, by the way, is not some lightweight, crazy radical, you don't have to listen to me or to Lizzie or to Julie. I mean, who are we, This is one of the heavies of the tradition. This is Babe Ruth, right? I mean, this is you're in Chicago. Ernie Banks, I mean, this is somebody serious. And he says, and so now the Gemara wants to know, what did he mean by that? They want to know. They got to get specific. Listen carefully. In Brachot, in Gemara Brachot, in Talmud, Rabbi Eliezer said, you can't make your tefillah keva. Eino tachnonim. It's not really prayer. What did he mean by keva? 3 ideas. 1, anyone whose prayer is like a heavy burden on him. Oh, I got to daven. Oh, I got to daven. You know what? What do you like 3 o'clock Yom Kippur afternoon? Oh, no? You're soaring. Yeah, but don't you have some kind of... No. See, you guys never had this experience. Excuse me for just a second. But you should have spent 2 years in a suburban congregation before you came here. You got to do the Abramowitz bar mitzvah. You want to understand what they're talking about? You got to do Brittany Abramowitz's bar mitzvah, right? I mean, and you're sitting there, and you realize that you and Brittany are the only Jews in a room. Brittany and her skirt that's cut up to her tuchus, and her 6-inch, what are those, Louboutin heels? What are those called, with the red soles? What are they called? Yeah, Christian Louboutin. Yeah, only he's a Yid, I'm sure. Yeah, right. And then you know it. Anyway, I shouldn't be saying this. No, it's then I wouldn't say such a thing. That would be cruel and unusual. The rabbi said, whoever doesn't say it in a manner of supplication. It's a question of how you say it. But here's the most radical thing. Listen to this one. Rav and Rav Yosef, who also are biggies, say, what Rabbi Eliezer meant was, whoever isn't able to add something new to your prayer. Something new. Every time you pick up the phone to talk to God, you've got to tell him something new. Prayer has to be new. Now, what do you usually hear? Prayer has to be traditional. But here there's the opposite tradition. It has to be new. It has to be new. And you see the same thing added here. There's a wonderful medrash in the Midrash, in the Tanchuma about Abraham. Now, Abraham, after Sarah dies, it says Abraham went on and took another wife. So the rabbis want to know, how come the Bible had to tell me that? Why was that important? And so now they're going to say something about tefillah. It's about tefillah, right? So they say, how many services does a person say each day? Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman taught, as the day changes 3 times each day, one needs to pray 3 times a day. So where do we get the tradition of 3 times a day prayer? You have morning, midday, and evening. It's a reflection of the natural cycle. We pray in reflection to the natural cycle. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, no. We have 3 services every day to reflect Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The morning service represents Abraham, the energy of Abraham. How would you define the energy of Abraham? Well, yeah. What? Feisty. Heroic. Abraham is heroic. You wake up in the morning, you're Abraham. Isaac, you're contemplative. That's true. Jacob, you're... That's what happens when you let a psychiatrist read the Torah. Rabbi Akiva, now it gives you another reflection. Listen to this. Rabbi Akiva, when he would pray with the community, would pray according to custom, kedarka. But when he prayed by himself, he had a different way of doing it. How would he pray? He would start at one corner of the room and end up at the opposite corner. What does that mean? He danced. When Rabbi Akiva was in a minyan, he prayed like everybody else. Right? But when no one was watching, when Rabbi Akiva was all by... Now think about this. And the rabbis know this. Now why wouldn't he do that when everybody else was around? What? Well, he'd bump into people, yeah. Could be distracting. It could be that he didn't want to set a standard that everybody else couldn't keep. But in his own personal religious life, yeah. No, it's not arrogant. It recognizes that certain people are good at certain things and people are good at other things. And he says, this is something I'm going to keep to myself. I'm just asking. But when he was by himself, what would he do? He doesn't recite his prayers, he danced his prayers. So what would be the Rabbi Akiva way to do a service? No. What would be the Rabbi Akiva way to do a service?
Your whole physical self.
You'd clear the chairs away, and the service would be done bodily. It'd be like a yoga class. Right? It would be such, and it was such a vigorous davening, and he was so taken with the transcendence of his mood that he didn't notice that he started at one end of the room and ended up at the other end of the room. And then the last piece of this medrash says, why 3 services? So that a person would add to his prayers. It was never meant to be a fixed tradition. It was never meant to be a finished tradition. We were never supposed to print the prayer book. Printing the prayer book was a sin. Because once we printed the prayer book, what happened? It got fixed. It got set. It got finished. It had a beginning, and it had an end, and a middle, and you knew where you were in the prayer book. You were never supposed to print it. Why? Because the kavanah was that you came to this service this week as you. And there were words to be said to God, it's true. But the more important thing was, how do we get you where you are to a place where you feel connected. It was never supposed to be printed. It was never supposed to be set down and finished. It was never supposed to be established. It was always supposed to be highly fluid, highly poetic, highly physical. You weren't supposed to sit on your tuchus for 3.5 hours in shul. First of all, who the hell can do this anyway? And second of all, that's not the way it was supposed to be. You were supposed to be dancing your prayers and moving your prayers and adding to your prayers and bringing what happened to you this week to your prayers. It was never supposed to be like this.
Why did it become like that?
Because we got afraid. Because out of fear, we were afraid that we might lose. Out of fear, we started to think to ourselves, they did it better than we do it. Our ancestors knew it better than we, so we had better copy what they did. We had better emulate what they did. We better preserve and protect what they did, because maybe we'll do it wrong.
Well, what if it's not that at all? What if it comes from someplace else? These are the rabbis.
Right.
They already knew. What about, now you have to go teach the world what you've just come up with.
Uh-huh.
How are you going to teach this to people?
Right.
What are you going to do? When you teach a child to read,
Uh-huh.
you got to start with the letters,
Right.
right? And then you got to start with the small words, and then you get to the sentences, and then they get to the paragraphs, and then they get to the story, and the stories come in,
Right.
right? But so in order to get to this place, you have, and if you want everybody to know the code,
Right.
you got to teach the code,
Right.
right?
You have to model it.
So part of the problem comes from the fact that they got so obsessed in the getting the code right,
Uh-huh.
making sure that everybody got the code,
Right.
that they forgot the covenant.
Right. And they forgot that the principal commandment is to add something new to your tefillah, to move during the tefillah, to bring your deepest self to the tefillah. It became form without substance. And that was the tragedy. And
They
then,
couldn't figure out how to
because they couldn't figure out how do you meld the three traditions. The idea of a spontaneous personal emotional prayer, the idea of a fixed collective expression, and the prophet's demand that it always come from the heart. And those are the three voices that always have to be balanced or combined or melded in order to make the prayers to what they are. Todd's going to turn off the lights. So I'm going to ask you for one more thing before we close. Tell me. Look, I have the source and you have the source. What does the source say? What does the source say? He had one way for doing it in public, but when he was on his own, and he wasn't modeling for anybody, maybe he was free. Maybe that's what it was. And he let himself go. And the prayer lifted him up and he levitated. And he levitated. Because remember, in public, who is he? In public, who is he? He's Rabbi Akiba. But in private, who is he? He's Akiba ben Yosef. He wasn't able to free himself in public from that in order to be truly free. That's a great question. I think, what do you think? What do I think? Who cares what I think? What do you think? Could be. Pick a prayer. Pick a prayer. If you don't pick a prayer, I'll pick a prayer. What? Yeah. No, I think it's a question of being, of feeling that sense of connection, that sense of transcendence, and of having a way to express that.
So prayer didn't work for him in the community.
Correct. What's on page 90? You want the Kaddish? Okay, I'll give you the Kaddish. Everybody want the Kaddish? Chatzi Kaddish, full Kaddish, mourner's Kaddish. We say 3 different Kaddishes in the course of a morning service. Chatzi Kaddish, full Kaddish, mourner's Kaddish. What is a Kaddish? Kaddish was The Kaddish was a prayer that was said at the end of a study session. I sit with my REB. I sit with my master. I sit with my teacher. I learn with him. I learn with her. I'm so into the learning that the hours go by, I don't even notice the clock. You ever have one of those sessions? I'm so into the learning that I'm so engaged. I'm so into the learning that it's breathless. I'm so into the learning that I'm touched, that I'm moved. Teacher said, 3 o'clock, Todd wants to set the room. You got to finish. Oh, God. Why do we have to finish? I'm just getting it. I'm just getting it. Oh, and there's a sense in the room of, it has to end. It has to end. The room literally deflates. It's like God has left the building. Poor God. The God that has lived here between us and among us as we learn together is leaving, diminished because we have to stop. And so we want to give God a little CPR for the road. God, I know that you're weakened because we have to stop. So you should be strengthened. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei rava. V'alma divrach yirtei. You know, one day, God, in your world, we're not going to have to stop. We'll get to continue learning. There won't be the constraints of time and maintenance staffs and chairs to fold up and lights to turn off. One day the world will be perfected and we'll just be able to learn all the time and enjoy this. But for now, alas, we are physical creatures in a material world, and time rules us. And time rules us. And even the best things in life have to come to an end. The teacher got sick. The teacher got sick. And so the students came to his bedside, and he taught them there, in his house, at his bedside, with what little voice he had left. And when he finished the shiur, the lesson, they said the Kaddish, because that bit of Torah left the world while he stopped. And then the teacher died. And the students said, let's go back to his house and let us teach his Torah. Because even though he died, even though she died, she lives in the Torah that she's taught us. And if we keep that Torah, that wisdom alive, that spirit alive, that learning alive, he, she lives in us, among us, and with us. So they came back to the house, and they taught that teacher's learning, and they finished with Kaddish, as every lesson is finished with Kaddish. And then the community said, every one of us brings Torah into the world. Every one of us brings wisdom into the world. Every one of us brings spirit into the world. Every Jew, every human being has something to contribute to the collective light of the world. And therefore, Kaddish must be said for everybody. Kaddish must be said for everybody. And that's where you get Kaddish from. It's said in the service as a separator between the sections of service, because we're about to finish a service, and it's like saying, oh, that was good. It's like you're finishing something sweet and wonderful, like a good shower, you know, or a good experience of intimacy, or a good workout, or a great meal, and you sit back and say, that was good. And at the end of the service, you say the full Kaddish, because the whole experience is over, as if to say, the sad part about being a human being is that we live in time and space, and all the great, even the sweetest things have to come to an end. But somehow in God, all of these things are stored up, and online. All of these things are stored up, and I might be able to come back and visit it again. And that's what Kaddish says. Kaddish says that every human being brings a word of Torah in the world, and that it is our job to fortify God every time somebody leaves us and leaves the world, because that word of Torah has been erased from our conscious world. It has to be brought back to life. So, with that word, Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei rava. Thanks. Take care.
well. Sing loud and sing well.